there's no difference between gold and Bitcoin in one element, which is gold is the accepted store of value. It's not a store of value. It is an accepted store of value. So when we think about companies spending money, and I think this is one of the criticisms I have for the people that have been out there saying it's a bubble, they'll never get the revenues, is that they're thinking about it first in, if you take the aggregate and you go, there's going to be $5 trillion of spend, we're never going to get the money. I do believe that we're at a point where people can focus on it from a profit margin perspective. Not all these companies.
Visser's central philosophy is the moat theory. He posits that there are only three things that have survived or will survive the test of millennia: gold, religion, and Bitcoin. Gold is merely an accepted store of value, not an intrinsic one. And for the younger generation, it is obsolete. He notes, "My son will never buy gold. He'll buy Bitcoin." Bitcoin is the leader of the digital economy because it is the only accepted digital scarcity that has passed the test of time, reaching trillions in value. Please take a little time to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. You can also check out our other videos on cryptocurrencies and the overall digital asset space, and drop your comments and observations in the comment section below. Everything you do helps with the YouTube algorithm and immensely contributes to the channel's growth. Thanks, and enjoy the video.
Yeah, to me, it's I guess there's two things for people who still don't understand it. I really do want people to think, if you're talking about gold in some positive way, there's no difference between gold and Bitcoin in one element, which is gold is the accepted store of value. It's not a store of value. It is an accepted store of value. So I like to say that there's only three moats in the world, meaning three things that have survived for thousands of years, and one of them hasn't survived for thousands, but it's gold, it's religion, and it's Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is accepted. You don't have to like it, but because of the Bitcoin white paper and because of the fact that it has gone through the test of time, it reached a status of trillions of dollars while nothing else got even close. It is the only accepted thing right now, which to me is, it's a store of value and it's the representation of the digital economy. Now, as someone who I mentioned lived in Brazil, I have a very different viewpoint than most people on the way this works in the end. And this is the reason why when I finally decided to make a large investment into it back when my son was playing the video game of crypto, it all started to make sense to me when Michael Saylor took me on a history lesson of money. And I combined that with the Sapiens book and just what I believed in kind of what was happening, and realized that, this government debasing won't stop. But one of the things Michael Saylor never gets credit for in his description of this is the fact that the reason that he did this was not just the government debasement, it was the government debasement connected to what he was going through, which is his business was now being zombified. He had become a zombie relative to the Mag 7, Microsoft in this case. And he basically said, I have $1 billion of cash, so I'm not going out of business, but I will be out of business based on the government printing money and reflating while I'm getting zero interest rates on my money sitting on the balance sheet. So I can't go out and buy stocks. I can't do anything. So what am I going to do with this money? You will effectively destroy me, you and Microsoft combined. So think of that as the Mag 7 destroying things. At the same time, the government is printing money to offset the destruction that the Mag 7 is doing to the rest of the economy. That is the way it connected a dot for me. And I said, now I get why Bitcoin works, because it has scarcity. It actually is something that was built to not have more of this. Let me understand where it fits in. And back in 2020, I just decided that the Paul Tudor Jones argument, this will be the fastest horse in the race, made sense. And then I did my studies and I kept going, and I realized that, wait, this fits in with my overall view of Joseph Schumpeter, that eventually capitalism will cannibalize itself. And the only thing that will survive, and this is the final part of it, the end game is if you don't have a moat. So if Michael Saylor had to do this because he didn't have a moat around his business, eventually with artificial intelligence, there will be no moats. So you want to invest in the only moats that are available, which are religion, gold, and Bitcoin. Gold to me is an old person moat, which is fine. I don't meet many young persons. My son has never traded gold. He's never bought gold, and I don't think he ever will. He'll buy Bitcoin. So as the demographics play out, as the moats are destroyed, I see Bitcoin as being the end result, as the leader of the digital economy. I think tokenization is getting us closer to that. I think IBIT and the iShares were getting us closer to that. And the IPO piece was really about, Felix, the fact that I thought that we needed to eventually see a less concentration in this asset. It was the biggest weakness I saw. 10,000 people cannot own 33% of an asset that's going to be mature. It needs to be spread to where, when you go look at the holders list, the number one holder has no more than 2% or 3%, unless you're Elon Musk with Tesla. Basically, over time, the distribution of the people who started it gets handed out to most of the people. And to finalize it, again, the poor people in the world need something to invest in. They don't believe in their governments. There's 7.5 billion people that will never participate in the Western world fiat system. And I believe that we're in a democratizing period where the poorest kid in Brazil now has free education from the best teacher in the world, ChatGPT. They are finally getting banking through DeFi, and they're finally going to get the ability of having remittances, of selling entrepreneurial work that they can sell to anyone in the world via the same way I do content. I think there's a democratizing force, which will take another 20 years. And I think most of that money will end up migrating into Bitcoin. So that's my long journey into where it'll come and where it'll go.
How do you think about how software and these network, social media companies grew during that time where the cost would stay pretty fixed? And now we're in this, I don't know if I'd call it one-to-one increase in costs with the marginal increase in participation from data centers. But yeah, just curious, how do you think about those two contrasts?
Yeah, I think this is an important topic, and I was trying to think as you were asking the question. A good way for people to hear this in a way that isn't, I guess, gets their brain to think differently. So when we think about companies spending money, and I think this is one of the criticisms I have for the people that have been out there saying it's a bubble, they'll never get the revenues, is that they're thinking about it first in, if you take the aggregate and you go, there's going to be $5 trillion of spend, we're never going to get the money.
The highest value revenue streams will come from the physical interaction of AI with the world, humanoids performing surgery, complex logistics, and ultimately solving aging. Visser boldly states that healthcare, with 50% of entitlements related to aging, is where the revenues are infinite. He predicts aging will be solved within the next 5 years due to AI, a prediction that dwarfs any dot-com bubble valuation.
Okay, that I can argue all day is ridiculous. We will get the revenues. It's not even a question. And I can go through the different frameworks as we go through this conversation as to where it'll come from. But then there's the other problem, which is I don't think people are looking at AI in the way that it should, which is, again, back to railroads, electricity, and all the benefits that come down the line. These are brains. So instead of saying a data center and the build out, these are just gigantic brains that get smarter and smarter the builder of the data center. The bigger the brain, the more likely we are to solve the world's greatest problems. And we're entering a stage now where the build out is transitioning from text. So LLMs is something everyone fully grasps. Well, now people are going to start to understand the difference between an LLM and a VLM. And a VLM is a visual language model. So that's taking not just the text, but it's taking the text that you've learned. So think of it as what you got from going to school, and then the visual, which is everything that we learn from every day in terms of intuition, crossing the street, figuring out how to duck from a bird flying into us, how to hit a baseball, all those different components is the next thing. And the amount of compute necessary to interact with the world is anywhere from 50 to 1,000 times more compute needs to be able to integrate the textual learning side with the visual learning side. Eventually, we'll get into visual language action, which is for humanoids and for military. So as people think about that and they go through the journey of all we've done so far is basically set our brains to college. Now we're about to go through learning everything and going through the visuals, and it takes a tremendous amount of information. The most powerful part of the revenue streams are going to come from the interaction with the actual event, seeing things going through it, whether it's on the medical side. First, we're going to have drug discovery, but then eventually we'll have humanoids doing surgery. To do surgery, they have to have perfect hand movements. They have to know exactly where things are. They have to be able to see things, make decisions on the fly. And it's not just the amount of compute necessary for their brains floating from the from satellites, because right now what we have is LLMs are on our phone, meaning we're getting information in ChatGPT through Wi-Fi or through cellular. Eventually, for robots to work and humanoids to fight on the battlefield, they need to have a brain that doesn't depend on satellites. They need to have a brain that depends on what they're looking at right now. That takes a tremendous amount of batteries and compute. So we're at a very important stage for people to recognize that when you hear people say this is a bubble, we'll never get the revenues. I wrote a piece yesterday for 22V on AI drug discovery, and I said, I just asked ChatGPT what the value is of curing cancer. Like, what revenues, if every pharmaceutical company, as Eli Lilly's breaking out right now, it's $1 trillion company, Google's breaking out because of isomorphic labs and Gemini 3, the healthcare side is probably, to me, the place where the bubble gets the biggest, but it's also where the revenues are infinite. 50% of our entitlements are related to aging, and we're going to solve aging as a problem in the next 5 years. So whatever people think about AI, they don't have enough work. And if you listen to someone above the age of 60 who never uses it, who goes to Michelin star restaurants every day as their lifeblood, doesn't sit in front of a computer, why would you listen to them on what's happening on artificial intelligence? It's way above their pay grade. You wouldn't ask them to do surgery on you. Don't ask them what AI is going to mean, because all they're doing is taking the .com bubble and going, this is the same thing I saw in the .com bubble. It's a big build out. It's going to end badly. One more thing on your build out, and I included this in my weekend report this time, but on the CapEx side, the CapEx for the .com bubble was funded by the telecom companies, which were low margin companies that are barely still alive. This one is done by the people who are the experts in artificial intelligence. They are the global experts using the cash that they've made over their lifetime in domination to spend the money on it. Will there be casualties? Yes. Will every company get the revenues they need to justify the spending? No, but they're actually in a race for both the military supremacy, their own legacies, and solving cancer. And that's a very different thing than trying to grow your revenues. They view this as an end game for solving all the world's problems. So it's not going to stop, and people can keep fighting it if they want, but it's a mistake. So I'll take it back to the profit margin side. I think you're going to see profit margins come down. I mean, when I see everyone talking about debt to cash flow and debt to EBITDA, I laugh, because it wasn't that long ago that we cared about debt to equity, but we don't talk about debt to equity anymore because their equity is massive. So it's like, okay, let's just talk debt to cash flow. This is a bearish argument to go through on stuff. So I do believe that we're at a point where people can focus on it from a profit margin perspective. Not all these companies are going to be justified in spending this much money. And your job as an investor is to try and find out when the point in time is, to your point, this risk will grow. It is zero risk today. Is it a risk in 3 years? I think any risk in AI spending out 3 years becomes a significant risk for one important reason. As you spend more money on the brain getting smarter and smarter, it will come up with solutions that you didn't think about in your spend out. So maybe we won't need as many data centers in 3 years, but we're not at that intelligence point yet to get there. So at some point, the amount of innovation that we end up spending gets a brain that's so good that we have thousands of Einsteins. You're going to solve problems in power. You're going to solve problems in chip efficiency. You're going to solve problems in that. We can't do that yet. We can't get the scaling of it yet, but when you add another 3 years of just exponential intelligence, we're going to get closer to it. So I don't want to ever sound like a person that doesn't believe there's any risk. I actually believe there's an enormous amount of risk the faster this goes and the bigger the build out goes, because we just get closer to a world where deflation becomes the major issue. That is the one thing I will say to everyone going through this, is eventually the faster we have intelligence grow, the closer we're getting to a deflationary spiral, not in asset prices, because profit margins will still be growing for the S&P 500 or for public companies, but you will reach a point that it will be a competition where the amount of losers speeds up dramatically over time. Just remember, NVIDIA is a $5 trillion company. The Russell 2000 market cap is a total $3 trillion or just over $3 trillion. That was not the case back in 2010 when this whole thing kind of accelerated. So you've already had a disruption to not only the median voter in the United States of America and across the globe, you've also had a disruption and concentration from small companies versus big companies.
Finally, Visser brings the discussion back to Bitcoin's role as a force for democratization. He notes the extreme concentration of ownership in Bitcoin was its biggest weakness, with 10,000 people owning 33% of the asset. The recent institutional influx, ETFs, and early holder distribution are acting as a silent IPO to decentralize ownership. making the asset mature and robust. Please take a little time to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. You can also check out our other videos on cryptocurrencies and the overall digital asset space, and drop your comments and observations in the comment section below. Everything you do helps with the YouTube algorithm and immensely contributes to the channel's growth. Thanks, and enjoy the video.